Hey guys, I'm your host Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to this week's episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. If you're looking for more to listen to once you're done with this episode, I've been recording various audiobooks that you can now find on our Patreon, Fourth Wall store, and various audiobook outlets, including Spotify. I'm adding more all the time, so if you need another hit of Japanese horror, head over to patreon.com/Tara A. Devlin, the Kowabana Fourth Wall shop, or your favourite online store to pick some up right now. This week, we're heading back to our terrifying tour of Japan by checking out some scary stories from Japan's northernmost island, Hokkaido. Known for being incredibly cold and incredibly mountainous, it's not just the snow and/or bears you have to be wary of out there, it seems. First up, a man hunting in the mountains is worried when his usually calm and brave dog starts getting incredibly worked up over something he can't see. Are they truly alone out there? And does he really want to know either way? Find out what lurks in the darkness in Mountain Spirit. This is the story of a hunter from Hokkaido. He was camping in the mountains one day while hunting a bear. Suddenly, his hunting dog, who had been sleeping next to him, jumped up and started growling. "What is it?" the hunter asked. Normally, his dog wasn't even frightened by brown bears, but now all his hair stood on end and he growled at a corner of the tent. Thinking it might be a brown bear attacking them at night, the hunter grabbed his rifle and opened the tent flaps. When he did, his dog took off running at light speed outside. The dog ran to an open space near the slope outside their campgrounds and started barking. Then, after barking for a while, suddenly his tail curled up and the dog whimpered and retreated. Then again, he ran over to the empty space and started barking, before retreating. This went on, over and over. At first, the hunter thought it was a brown bear attack, but now he was horrified. His beloved dog never even cowered in the face of a brown bear, but now something was terrifying him. Then the hunter remembered a phrase he'd heard before: mountain spirit. He had heard from some older hunters and acquaintances about a spirit or monster that appeared on mountains that was invisible to the human eye. This spirit would approach hunters and their dogs unawares, before ultimately killing them. The hunter had paid especially close attention to these invisible creatures, as it was said that if you ran into them while in the mountains, they brought immediate misfortune. The hunter immediately put a leash on his dog and dragged him back to the tent, keeping his gun aimed at the area his dog was barking at. All night, he prayed that whatever was out there didn't come any closer. His dog barked and growled all night, but when dawn broke, he finally calmed down. And as the sun rose that day, he went out to check where his dog had been barking, but he found no evidence that anything had been there, nor did anything look different to usual. But when he told a senior hunter about it a few days later, he replied in an oddly happy voice, "Ah, so you ran into that one, huh?" Apparently, these days, even hunters rarely ran into that strange spirit in the mountains. In this next story, a group of friends visit a famous abandoned hospital for a test of courage. But a split-second terrified decision changes the rest of their lives forever. Find out why in Abandoned Hospital. This is a rather famous story in Hokkaido. There's an abandoned village somewhere in Yubetsu, and there you can find an abandoned hospital. That hospital is basically all alone in the middle of a forest that runs alongside a road. If you go there for a test of courage, the first thing you'll probably notice is how inconvenient the location is. Like I said, the hospital is in a forest that runs alongside a road, but there's no way to actually drive up to the hospital. That's right, there's no road there through the forest. It's a hospital that ambulances can't reach. If you actually go there, you'll understand, but it's like, how did they build this place? Or what was this place built for? So, 10 or so years ago, one of my girlfriend's older friends visited that hospital for a test of courage. There were 4 of them, 2 guys and 2 girls. A and A-ko, B and B-ko. The 2 couples held hands as they walked around the top floor. Nothing really happened, so finally, the 4 of them went down to the basement. Still holding hands, they walked around and checked various rooms down there, before B-ko suddenly stopped. "Hey, you won't let go of my hand no matter what happens, right? You won't leave me here, right?" she said. "Yeah, don't worry about it," B replied. But she remained silent for a moment. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Something grabbed my leg, and I can't move." At that moment, everyone let go and left B-ko behind as they fled the basement. The other 3 ran all the way back to the car. In fact, they were so scared that they left B-ko there and drove all the way home without her. The next morning, A-ko told her parents about what happened the night before. They called B-ko's parents, their homeroom teacher, A and B, plus the police, and then they all made their way over to the abandoned hospital. But when they got there, they explained what happened as they made their way over to the basement. But when they got there, they couldn't find any stairs. That's right, this hospital never had a basement to begin with. Apparently, B-ko's disappearance was actually reported in the newspapers at the time as well. When a group of climbers find themselves stuck in bad weather, they soon realize that bad weather isn't the only thing to be wary of out in the mountains. What lurks in the fog, waiting for them to leave? Find out in The Hokkaido Brown Bear. The land of Hokkaido has long had a problem with brown bears. People from the main island probably don't really get it, but if you're walking around the mountains of Hokkaido, then you absolutely must have bear bells and bear spray with you. People probably think that places like Canada or other foreign countries have more brown bears, but in reality, Hokkaido is the one place on Earth where the largest number of brown bears live together in such close density. Not a lot of people know that, but it's a fact. So, I heard this story from a classmate who was a member of an outdoor club in Hokkaido. One summer, there was a climbing group crossing the Tokaichi Mountains. This group consisted of 5 people: A, B, C, D, and E. A was the leader, B the sub-leader. A, B, C, and D had decent experience with climbing, while E was a beginner who had only started that same year. And a few members of this group had previous experience with running into brown bears, although they had escaped without injury at the time. What follows next is a summary of the diary A kept as they crossed the mountains. Day 1. No incidents. Everything went according to plan. Everyone is happy and enjoying the scenery. Day 2. We're already on the route along the ridge, but last night's weather forecast for today wasn't great, so we decided to stop. As predicted, rain and wind picked up, so we ate inside our tent. We had fun playing cards and chatting as we filled our bellies. After listening to the forecast again, we decided to leave the next morning if there was only a light rain. Day 2 otherwise ended without incident. Day 3. C was the first to wake up this morning and went outside to check the weather. When we asked how it looked, C said, "It's a little foggy. We should probably wait." I looked outside and everything was white. We've decided to delay our departure. After breakfast, I went outside, but the fog doesn't appear to be clearing. Because we stayed overnight, the other members appear to want to go, but we can't be having an accident now. After talking it over, we decided to stay here today as well. At lunchtime, the fog got even thicker. There's no rain, but it's too dangerous to walk around in the fog, so we can't even leave the tent. There was a slight accident in the evening. E messed up and left the pot outside the tent. The nocturnal animals are active around this time, so it's dangerous to leave the smell of food outside. Before long, we heard the light footsteps of an animal walking around the tent. It was a fox. We chased it away. It was no doubt here because of the pot. There are brown bears around here too. We've seen them during the day, but at night it's dangerous. This marks the end of our 3rd day. Day 4. We checked outside in the morning, but the fog was so thick that we couldn't even see 2 meters ahead of us. Our original plan was to take a different route back down the mountain if we were forced to stay another day. But with the fog this thick, it would be dangerous to move at all. It goes without saying that we stayed put again. We thought about descending if the weather cleared up in the afternoon, but the fog was even thicker, and it was so dark that you could barely even see any daylight. We were sick of chatting and playing cards, so in the evening, we decided to sleep early. The inside of the tent was damp and moist thanks to the fog, making it incredibly humid and uncomfortable. After a few hours, something strange happened. B was the first to notice, and because I was sleeping next to him, he woke me up. "I've been hearing footsteps. It doesn't seem to be a fox." Everyone sat up to listen, as though nobody had been asleep. Heavy, slow footsteps. Crunch, crunch. The occasional damp breaths. Everyone held their breath, as though imagining what it might be. A brown bear? The footsteps circled the tent. It seemed there was only one. The intense stink of animal pierced our nostrils. Everyone moved to the center of the tent and we all froze. Before long, the bear started pressing its nose to the tent fabric and intensely sniffing it. Once it sniffed, it circled the tent and then sniffed again. We were all so scared that nobody moved and nobody spoke. Everyone trembled violently. The bear then began to throw its body against the tent. The fabric of the walls caved in the shape of a bear. We all shrank back so it didn't touch us. If it wanted to, then the bear could tear through the tent like it was paper. We somehow managed not to scream while the tent violently shook. The bear continued hitting the tent for the next 5 minutes or so, walking around the tent as it did so. It would hit the tent and then walk again. E started crying. I almost did too. This continued until dawn, and then everything went quiet. We all slept for a while. Day 5. The sound of birds woke me up, but it seemed the fog still hadn't lifted as it was rather dim. I could still smell the brown bear. Was it still watching the tent from somewhere nearby? Everyone remained quiet. The silence lasted several hours. Around lunch, we heard footsteps again. After they walked around for a bit, They disappeared. In the evening, D summoned up all his courage to poke his head outside the tent. The fog has lifted a little. A few rays of sunshine were poking through, and it seemed the weather was clearing. Everyone was divided on whether we should immediately descend or whether we should wait until tomorrow. The bear might still be right outside, and if we started down now, it was plain as day we'd have to keep going throughout the night, without any place to rest. The fog still hadn't cleared. Bad weather and rushing at night were a recipe for disaster. As the leader, I couldn't permit us to leave just yet. I don't know whether it was a calm decision made while terrified out of my mind. At any rate, it was soon dark. Nobody spoke. Not out of fear, but largely because everyone had conflicting ideas. That night, the bear continued circling the tent and occasionally hitting it. Nobody slept. Day 6. The burgeoning sunlight yesterday seemed to be nothing more than a lie, as the fog was now even thicker. Even after we woke up, nobody spoke. Nobody ate either, perhaps so as not to work up the bear. But this morning, our surroundings seemed quiet. I couldn't smell anything either. After a few hours, C said he was going outside. Everyone opposed, but he said, "I just want to check it out, and I don't think the bear is nearby now." I gave him permission, but only if he immediately came back. After C went into the fog, B complained to me, but then soon fell silent. Before long, we heard footsteps. We went to open the tent, expecting C, but then stopped. The stench of animal. "What about C?" D whispered. The animal's breathing was even rougher than the day before. It soon started hitting the tent. We all huddled together, screaming silently. After circling the tent for a while, the bear seemed to calm down. The footsteps disappeared, but the smell of it in the air was still strong. The bear smell hung around for the rest of the day, and we didn't move. C didn't return either. Was he attacked? At this point, the writing in the diary starts to become more disordered. The kanji becomes more plain, and the use of hiragana increases. Day 7. The fog was thick again today. The bear seems to have disappeared, perhaps to go eat. After a short silence, E said he was going to go back down the mountain. His eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep, and his voice hysterical. I tried to stop him, but he refused to listen. "I'll call for help once I get down, so wait here," he said, taking a pack and disappearing into the fog. From the 5 of us, only 3 remain. Myself, B, and D. While the bear was gone, we ate some nutritional food like calorie mate bars. Nobody spoke. Time passed. I looked outside around lunchtime, but the fog was still there. The bear returned as the sun was setting. We huddled in the center of the tent and tried to hold out as the bear continued hitting it. The humidity was so intense that we were sweating, and yet everyone trembled and nobody said a word. Did E reach the bottom of the mountain yet? Day 8. It's still foggy. In the morning, there was no sign of the bear. Nobody said they wanted to leave. I'm writing this diary in silence to take my mind off things. I hope I can safely return with it in my hands. Around 2 p.m, B lost it. First, he started laughing. Then, he started screaming. Then he ran out of the tent while laughing again. I watched him run off into the fog, listening to his laughter before it shortly disappeared. D quietly and slowly closed the tent door. "He's gone, huh?" It was the first time I'd heard him speak in a long time. As night fell, the bear came again. The two of us hugged each other until dawn. Day 9. The fog is heavy again today. It seemed the bear was nearby again, but around noon it left. We stayed in the center of the tent and slept a little. It was incredibly quiet. During the evening, the bear's footsteps woke us up again. I wanted to cry every time it hit the tent, but I managed to keep it in. I want to go home. Why doesn't the bear attack us already? Day 10. The fog is heavy again today. In the afternoon, D silently stood up and left. I couldn't stop him. The fog won't go away. The bear came back. I feel like I'm going insane. Day 11. The fog. Heavy again. The bear. Here. Day 12. The fog is heavy again today. That was unexpectedly long, sorry. This group let the police know their plans before setting out, so they soon discovered the unusual situation. But due to the bad weather, they were unable to immediately go looking for them. When the weather cleared up and they set out, they found the tent empty and their goods scattered everywhere. Amongst them was the diary. C, the first to leave, was found dead only 50 meters from the tent. His throat had been wounded and he died instantly. E, the next to leave, fell from a cliff while descending the mountain. They found his remains. B had been viciously eaten around 1 kilometer from the tent. D was found dead at the bottom of a cliff on the route. They never found A. And that's the story I heard from my friend. Apparently, this was a really popular urban legend amongst climbers in Hokkaido for a while. But my friend said there really was a group of people who were attacked and killed by a bear as well. They were mostly amateurs, and they didn't submit a hiking notification form, so it took a while until their bodies were found. Judging by the state of the scene, it appeared a bear had gone through their stuff, and when they went back to get it, they were attacked too. Everyone who goes out walking in the fields of Hokkaido, please do make sure you take the utmost care when it comes to bears. On his way home from work one night, a man notices an interesting restaurant by the roadside that he's never seen before. But when he tries to find it again, it's as though it never existed. What's the deal with this place, and will he regret looking further into it? Find out in Something Restaurant. This happened when I moved to Sapporo for work. So, this wasn't something that happened ages ago, but rather quite recently. My company was located in the center of Sapporo, close to the station, and I finished work around 9 p.m. each night. I lived alone in an apartment, about a 15-minute ride from work. Every day, I just went to and from work and didn't do anything else other than eat and sleep. During winter, I couldn't ride to work. There was too much snow. But in summer, I took the same road basically every day. One day, I was riding north along that road, like I always did. In the dark, I saw something on the left-hand side of an intersection in Kita-Nijujo. It looked like a beautiful, sparkling Christmas light. I passed this way all the time, but I'd never seen this before. And so, feeling curious, I went over. There was a large sign that said, Something Restaurant. So I guess it was a cafe or restaurant or something like that. It was 8 p.m, so an hour earlier than I usually finished. I figured that maybe the store was always closed when I usually went home. Of course, it wasn't actually called Something Restaurant, but I can't remember exactly what it was. As I glanced at the outside of the store, it looked rather small and cozy, but inside it seemed to be decently large, with quite a few customers, and a woman who I guess was the owner, preparing some food. It's gotta be a restaurant, I thought. I told myself that next time I finished early, I'd check it out, and then continued on my way home. For the next month or so, I was busy every single day again, and I forgot all about the store. But then one day, when I was able to leave early, I suddenly remembered it again. I got on my bike and started looking for it on my way home. As I approached the intersection, I remembered it being on the left, so I looked over there. But there were no stores at all. Maybe it was further north. I kept going, but still there was nothing. Before long, I was home. All I could think was that somehow I must have missed it. I was able to go home early the next day as well, so again I looked for it. However, despite looking to the left at every single intersection, I couldn't see any sparkling lights or sign. And before I knew it, I was home again. I was so curious that I immediately jumped on my computer to look for the store on a food review website. Something restaurant. At the time, I still remembered what it was actually called. Then I found it. This is it, I thought, and I memorized the address and which intersection to turn at. The next day, I left work at 7:30 p.m. because I really wanted to go to that store. I turned at the intersection I had looked up beforehand, and there were the sparkling lights and the sign with something restaurant on it. There it was. I stopped my bike out the front and then went inside. Seemed I was the only customer there. The woman who looked like the owner showed me to a table and then gave me a menu. She recommended various coffees and handmade pizzas. I ordered that day's coffee and a pizza. Then I played around with my phone while I waited. Then I suddenly heard a loud sound, almost like an alarm clock. At the same time, several customers came out from the back of the store, I guess where the toilets were, and sat down at the tables. I looked around, confused, and there were now customers sitting at 6 or 7 different tables. I was sure nobody else was in the store, so I found it extremely weird. But when I looked at one of them, I noticed that their face was pitch black. When I say black, I don't mean smooth, but rather like there was a hole, and their face was just missing entirely. Nervously, I looked around at the other customers, and they were all the same. Despite that, I could sense they were all smiling at me. The other customers received their coffees. They lifted the cups up to their faces, and the steam seemed to get sucked into the black holes, where it swirled around for a bit. And right before my eyes, I watched their faces gradually reappear. What on earth? I was kind of scared and wanted to leave, but I thought it would be rude to leave without eating or paying for the food I ordered. Perhaps that's a very Japanese way of thinking in such a situation and such a place. I don't know. At any rate, I decided to wait for my food and then I'd leave right away. And before long, she brought my coffee and pizza. The woman had a normal smile, but she still seemed extremely creepy to me. I figured I'd drink my coffee and go, so I brought the cup to my lips. But then I saw my face reflected in it. It was smiling creepily back at me, and I could hear laughter coming out of the cup. Then My face in the coffee turned into a black hole, just like the other customers. Black steam coiled around my face, and the laughter got even louder. I put the cup back on the table, wiped my face with a nearby wet towel, and then immediately stood up. Then all the customers turned to look at me at once, and started laughing together. All their faces were black. I took 2 or 3 1,000 yen notes out of my wallet, put them on the table, and then fled from the store. I rushed home, and when I got back, I looked in the mirror. On the left side of my chin, there was a lump that looked like a black mole. It was a round bruise about 5 centimeters long. The next day, and the day after that, when I got close to that intersection, I looked to the left, but that something restaurant wasn't there. I went back to the food review website to find it again, but I realized that I couldn't actually remember the name of it anymore. I figured that if I did remember it and looked it up again, then turned left at that intersection around 8 p.m, I'd find that something restaurant again. I checked it every single day I rode past. After that, I transferred to Tokyo, however, and I stopped riding my bike to work and took the train instead. I went to the hospital to have them look at the black bruise-like thing on my face, and they said it was a dangerous mole, so they removed it with a laser. I wonder if that something restaurant actually existed, or if I was maybe just losing my mind. That whole thing was just so strange. An experienced climber is forced to take shelter for the night, but when he gets there, he finds he's not alone. But who are this couple, and what could they possibly be laughing about? Find out in Couple in the Shelter. This is a story that happened to a mountain climbing friend of mine while he was climbing the Daisetsuzan Mountains in Hokkaido during the coldest part of winter. The weather that day was great, the perfect weather for climbing. But it was still winter in the mountains, and as he climbed, the clouds grew thicker, and next thing he knew, he was enveloped in a thick fog. He had already gone too far to turn back. In fact, turning back at that point would be even more dangerous. The emergency shelter shouldn't be too far away, but with so much fog around, he couldn't tell where exactly he was. Should I just camp here? He wondered, and honestly, he had prepared for that eventuality. But, being an experienced climber, he knew it would be tough camping in such cold weather. Still, before long, it started to clear a little. Being able to see a little more around him, all he needed was to spot his target, and then he'd be fine from there. As the mountains faintly came into view, he was able to determine exactly where he was, and decided right away to head towards the shelter. About 2 hours later, the clear weather suddenly took another turn, and heavy snow began to fall. He grew more and more worried about whether he could find the shelter as the snow got deeper. But, despite his worries, he found the shelter unexpectedly easily. And it seemed that someone had already beat him to it and cleared the snow from the entrance. Deeply relieved, he went inside and found 2 people already asleep in sleeping bags on the other side of the room. He quietly finished eating and then decided to go to sleep as well. Several hours passed, or perhaps it was only a few minutes, but either way, muttering voices woke him up. It was the couple. Listening closely, he heard a man's voice and a woman's voice. It was rare for a woman to be out here in the mountains during this coldest period of the year, he thought. They appeared to be enjoying themselves, chatting about their current plans, the weather tomorrow, and occasionally trying to stifle their laughter about something. Before he fell asleep again, he thought about how he'd ask them their destination when they got up in the morning. If it was the same place, then maybe they could go together. The next morning, he woke up to a rather strange sight. Around 10 or so men came bursting into the shelter. As he sat up, rubbing his eyes, they all froze on the spot. "Ah, you're alive?" He had no idea what they were talking about. "Look, those two are..." One of the men pointed with his chin towards the couple in the back. "They're already dead." Meaning they had died while taking shelter. He asked what was going on, and apparently 3 days ago they had gotten a request for help over the wireless from these two, but because the weather was so bad, they couldn't fly the helicopter in. They had to proceed by foot, but when they arrived 2 days earlier, they were no longer able to contact them over the wireless, and when they found them, they had already frozen to death. They attempted to take the bodies back down with them, but the weather worsened once again, and fearing they would also need rescue themselves, they left the bodies in the shelter and withdrew. Today, they plan to carry the bodies back down the mountain again. Still, my friend was unable to understand just what was going on. If what they were saying was true, then why did he hear the couple breathing the night before? How could they have been chatting and laughing? It wasn't that strange to see or hear things when it was this cold. Was that what happened to him? But he had to check. Those bodies, are they a man and a woman? One of the rescuers nodded silently. They were newlyweds, he then said, his expression turning dark. Apparently, one of the rescuers knew my friend. He was pretty well known in the area as an alpinist. And he said to him, "You should be fine, but the weather is going to be bad again today, so you should head back right away." But still, he followed his original itinerary and then safely made his way back down the mountain. And as he was telling me all this, he said one final thing. "Nah, at the time it was so creepy that I thought about heading straight back down. But those voices I heard that night sounded so happy. It made me realize once again how much I love the mountains." A few years ago, he disappeared somewhere in the Alps. But he loved the mountains so much that I've no doubt he wanted to spend the rest of eternity there. And that thought honestly makes me feel a little better. For our last story this week, we're going back 100 years. Back to that time when Hokkaido was still being developed for a horrifying and mystical tale of one man's unfortunate run-in with something perhaps not of this world. Find out what in Burn Treatment. This is a story that happened near a spoil tip in Yubari, near the start of the Showa period. A-san was a coal miner who moved to Hokkaido from the mainland to help develop the area. While there, he was involved in an explosion that nearly cost him his life and left him with serious burns all over his body. The times being what they were, his treatment wasn't that great. They wrapped his entire body in bandages and carried him to his bunkhouse where his wife was waiting. The doctor informed her that his injuries were bad, but if he made it through the night, then he would eventually be okay. So, if anything happened, they should call him right away. He told them where he lived and then left. Late that night, A-san's wife was nursing him in the light of a single candle when she realized someone was at the front door. When she got up to check, she found several people standing there. The men said they worked with A-san. They were sorry to hear about the accident he suffered, and they wanted to see him right away, but unfortunately they couldn't just leave during the middle of work. So that was why they were here now. And they asked if they could help care for him. A-san's wife had been feeling so forlorn that their offer warmed her heart. She let the men in, although there were so many that they could barely fit. One by one, the men spoke to A-san, offered him words of encouragement, then sat down and offered some kind words to his wife as well. Her heart was completely set at ease. Then one of the men offered to examine him, claiming he had some medical knowledge. He appeared to be a fine gentleman, not someone she thought could be working in a coal mine. Perhaps he was someone's acquaintance. He claimed the burns were terrible, yes, but luckily he was exceedingly good at dealing with burns. If she allowed him to work with him overnight, then her husband would be cured, he said. There was no way she could refuse. And so, in the dim light, the gentleman got to work. The treatment was rough. The gentleman explained that the best way to treat burns was to remove the burnt skin. He took the bandages off and then he started casually peeling off A-san's skin. But A-san, who was known even amongst the miners for being strong and robust, couldn't tolerate the pain. In fact, he was in so much pain that he screamed and cried for someone to kill him. His wife sobbed, unable to do anything else. The treatment was so awful that she ended up covering her ears and crying. The gentleman informed them that this was the hard part, and it would soon all be over, all without so much as even an eyebrow twitch. They were unsure of how much time passed, but eventually, A-san's screams died down and silence filled the room. Then the gentleman stood up. He informed the wife that, although he had caused her worry, it would be fine now, and her husband would soon recover. She bowed over and over and saw the man off. The sky in the distance was getting brighter. It would soon be dawn. When she went back inside, she found the room suddenly empty. Just a moment ago, it had been overflowing with her husband's colleagues. She found this strange and incredibly unpleasant. If they were going to leave, they could at least say so first. Exhausted, she sat by her husband's bedside to rest, but the color of his face left her speechless. In the light of dawn, he looked as pale as a ghost. The woman clung to her husband and started crying again. They had been making so much noise that a neighbor had fetched the doctor, and when he saw them, he screamed, "Who touched my patient?" The way his bandages had been wrapped was clearly done by an amateur. After removing them, the doctor turned to look away. Before him lay a corpse with its skin cruelly removed. The incident was so bizarre that the police were called in, and they managed to get out of the half-crazed wife what had happened. However, neither the men nor the gentleman who appeared that night were ever found. Not in the neighbouring villages, and certainly not by the spoil tip. One person who heard the story said it must have been the work of a kitsune. Human scabs and burns were said to be miracle drugs for them, and in some areas, people who were suffering from bad burns or scabs might suddenly find themselves visited by a kitsune. A-san's wife had bad eyesight to begin with, and her eyelids were swollen from all the crying she had done. Perhaps a kitsune had merely taken advantage of that. Unfortunately, those who collected and shared this strange story never mentioned what happened to the wife after that. A massive thank you and shout out to this week's Kami tier members, Ella C, Emerald and Kenneth Kawamoto. It's thanks to your support, along with everyone else, that I'm able to keep doing this show, so thank you very much. Don't forget to check out Kaihan, Bizarre Crimes That Shook Japan Volume 2, out on Amazon right now. And check out our merchandise store at kowabana-shop.fourthwall.com. And if you'd like to chat about this week's stories, come and join us in the Kowabana Discord. You can find that link in the description or on kowabana.net. You can also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin for exclusive bonus stories and extras, or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/KowabanaJapan for all sorts of Japanese horror you won't find anywhere else. Thanks guys, stay safe, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.